Welcome, everybody, to our Chat with Two Rabbis. We have a new guest tonight, Rabbi Martin Wiesel, our member. Unfortunately, Rabbi Zvi Khan had some other commitment tonight and could not make it. He will see us next Tuesday, he said. So we have Rabbi Martin Wiesel and Rabbi Barry Silver, and we're going to be discussing the Megillah, the Ganze Megillah, and Tetzaveh, the Torah Parsha. So it is February 23rd, and take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It's a pleasure to be here in my Purim attire. And we have a special guest tonight, a rabbi within our own midst at Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor, Rabbi Martin Wiesel. And it's a great pleasure for me to be able to engage in dialogue with him because he's got a lot of great views. He's an author. He's written books, fascinating books, actually. I've read a couple of them, and he's just filled with knowledge about Judaism, and it'll be a pleasure to discuss things with him. In the past, we've had conversations with Rabbi Zvi Khan, who as an Orthodox rabbi, his views are quite a bit different than mine. Rabbi Wiesel's views will be closer, but fortunately not identical, because if they were, that would be very, very boring. But I'm sure that we'll have an interesting conversation, and everyone's welcome to join in with your thoughts. And I just want to comment, I really appreciate Joel's disguise. I think that's Joel. It's hard to tell who's behind that mask. I'm not sure, but I think it's Joel Brusso behind that demonic mask. Anyway, it's great to have everybody here. Rabbi Wiesel, if you'd like, I'll let you go ahead and start out. You could talk about the Torah reading, Tetzaveh, or you could talk about Purim, or you could talk about both. Whatever you like, it's all yours.
Okay, well, I only had like an hour and a half to prepare, so I'm not quite up on the Torah portion. I read a little bit of
Rabbi Wiesel, that's about an hour and 20 minutes more than I used. But go ahead.
I will say that even though Rabbi Barry's views and mine are not identical, over time, my views have shifted in his direction because he's very persuasive and what his views are. So they're not as far apart as they used to be. And they were never that far apart. The Torah portion is about, it's not too interesting. It's about priestly vestments and animal sacrifice. So I don't know if you want to actually hear what it's about, but
Rabbi Wiesel, I agree with you. This is not one of the more scintillating, exciting, drama-filled passages. It's all about bloody sacrifices, priestly garments, and the exact the description of the ark. There's not much in it. So if you'd like to focus on Purim or other matters, that would be fine. That's great.
Well, one thing I want to mention, because it's so recent, is we had Pamela Siegel's unveiling on Sunday, and I told him, I don't know if he was into it, I told him that in the Kabbalistic tradition, the soul, when the person dies, the soul hangs around the body. It misses the body very badly and hangs around with the body for a week. That's why you sit Shiva. And then it sort of goes its own way, but it's still hanging around the cemetery and other places. And so that's what Shiloh Shema is about, 30 days after that. And then it kind of goes its own way, but not totally. And so when you have the unveiling a year later, it comes back to watch the proceedings. And so that's kind of cool. So I don't know if that gave any comfort to Victor, but I said, Pam is here watching.
That's good. Hopefully I won't say anything to antagonize her like I did when she was around. So I'll try to be careful, knowing that she might be watching this discussion. Let me just comment on the Torah reading also. It definitely is not one of the more enlightened Torah readings. It's filled with animal sacrifices every other minute, and the altar is really bloody and gory. And you know, I talk a lot about the Torah and how it really is light years ahead of its time in so many ways, that it has concepts and ideals and values that the world is still trying to figure out. But juxtaposed with that is also some pretty primitive concepts that lead me to believe that it wasn't written in a perfect form. It represents our first steps towards morality. But one thing that is overlooked is the tremendous amount of animal life that was lost at that time for no reason whatsoever. And the people who were involved in this seem to be completely devoid of any type of compassion or consideration for the animals whatsoever. They were so indoctrinated to believe that God required this that there doesn't seem to be even a mention of, oh, by the way, I guess it's not very nice to do this to thousands and thousands of animals and fill the place with blood. I mean, to our sensibilities, it seems pretty grisly. To them, it didn't seem to affect them at all. So that's another casualty, I think, of the type of thinking that says that, you know, there's some God out there that wants us to sacrifice animals. There are some interesting passages. One is in this, it talks about the breastplate of decision. There was something known as Urim and Turim. Modern scholars don't know exactly what it is, but there was something that was on the breastplate of the priest, and he would use these in some type of magical way to be able to know the future and to be able to diagnose illness. And it mentions that in this passage. Scholars are still at a loss to understand exactly what it was or how it worked, but that also is in this Sedra called Titzavim, which means commandments. But I do think that Purim is a much more interesting topic to speak about. And Purim has a lot to do with what's going on today. You probably figure something like this could never happen today. But Purim describes a guy who was like an absolute ruler, and he could do anything he wanted to, and people would just bow down to him and accept anything he said and anything he did uncritically without even questioning it. And you might think, well, that could never happen today, but we've seen that the Purim story still applies today. Jewish people should not and do not normally bow down to any human authority. We ask questions, we challenge, we don't just accept what they're saying, and we certainly wouldn't allow them to kill someone in broad daylight and think that they could get away with this. Haman was the type that thought he could. Mordecai said, hey, man, come on. We're not going to go along with this. And so he refused to bow down. That's really what the story is all about. It's just that the Jewish people don't bow down to any human beings and are going to challenge anybody. And that's one reason why Jewish people have always been a thorn in the side of any dictator, any authoritarian, and any type of oppression. Others might go along with it. We don't. In recent history, in the last few years, we've seen that many Jews have kind of forgotten about the lesson of Purim. But I think it's important that this Purim we remind the Jewish people what the holiday is all about. One other thing I'll mention is that at the end of the story, it says that the Jewish people, in order to exact revenge upon Haman, not only have Haman hung on the same day that he wanted to hang Mordecai, but that the Jewish people were then turned loose and committed a massacre of Persians. I think it was to the tune of about 15,000 dead Persians. Now, the story in the Megillah doesn't explain why those people would have been massacred. It seems in the story that Haman is the only one who's doing this and he doesn't have support, but there must be something missing in the story, or maybe the people just figured, hey, we got an excuse, let's go around killing people. We don't really know, but there was a massacre. The Orthodox tend to look at it like, hey, that's great, we finally got the upper hand. But modern Jews, Reform and progressive Jews, are appalled and aghast at this type of a story. So much so that my father who was the founding rabbi of L'Dor Va-Dor, never mentioned it. Growing up with him, I never even knew about it, never heard about the massacre until I actually read the entire Megillah and then saw what was in it. My dad tried to shield me from things like that, and shielded L'Dor Va-Dor from it also. But if we really want to take a candid view of what Judaism's about and how far we've improved, it's important to know what the Megillah actually says. And fortunately, most Jewish people today don't celebrate that part of the holiday. Nor do we celebrate the death of Haman. We celebrate the delivery of the Jewish people, but we don't rejoice at anybody's death. At least modern Jews don't do that. All right, Rabbi Basol, do you want to speak about Purim and any messages?
My understanding is that once the order went out to kill the Jews from Haman, even though it was undermined, shall we say. They not only hung Haman, but his 8 sons. So we got rid of the whole line of Haman. But apparently the people who were working for Haman that went out to kill the Jews, they were the ones who were killed by the Jews. In other words, they were allowed to defend themselves, and that's why the massacre occurred, because the people that wanted to commit the massacre got massacred instead. So there was some justice in that, even though it's not a very pretty ending. So that's part of that.
In actuality, the traditional Jews, the Orthodox, have many what they call a midrash, which is really just something that they made up out of pure cloth or thin air to try to make the story sound a little more palatable. If you read the Megillah, what happened was the sentence against the Jews was commuted. The king took it back. There was no more death sentence on the Jews. There was no threat to the Jews. Mordecai was hung. And then even though the Jews were under no threat, they went and massacred about 15,000 people. And these people were not in any way responsible for or committed to killing the Jews, but the midrash or the story goes, they make things up to try to make it appear that this was justified. Another thing that was totally made up out of thin air, which justifies genocide, which is really pretty appalling, is that in the Exodus from Egypt, it is said that there were some really nasty, horrible people called the Amalekites. So the Amalekites were so vicious that they followed along the Jewish people, just waiting for a chance to strike. And when the Jews were very vulnerable, they went towards the back of the Jewish people where the women and the children were and started massacring people. And the Jewish people fought back and somehow survived, but they did a tremendous amount of damage. And then the word went out to annihilate the Amalekites and to wipe out every last Amalekite. Now, this story about the Amalekites waiting around and killing women and children, I believe, was contrived in order to explain or justify the genocide. But what happens is that they spare one Amalekite. One Amalekite was spared. The king was spared. And so the Jewish people had Rahmanas on him. And then according to tradition, again, there's absolutely no basis for it, because even the whole story of Purim is not historically found anywhere. But supposedly now, to support genocide, they were told Haman was a descendant of the lone surviving Amalekite. The moral of the story is, if God says wipe everyone out, you wipe everyone out, because by not doing that, now the Amalekites still live. And now, like every generation, anybody who does anything bad, like supposedly Hitler was also an Amalekite, Haman's an Amalekite, the guys who are doing the Inquisition, they're Amalekites. And so the lesson is that the enemies of the Jews need to be wiped out completely, every last man, woman, and child, which I don't think is a very pretty lesson. The lesson I like from Purim that I think we should take away from, if we have an evolved sense of the story, is we don't bow down to our authority figures. We ascribe to certain ideals and principles and values, and no person is ever allowed to trump those values. That's really the lesson of the Purim story. I'm interested in hearing what other people have to say about either the Torah passage or Purim or anything else. Anyone have any questions they want to ask? Maybe Rabbi Visol, you might indicate where how your views differ from mine, or where or your spiritual progress, or where you're at.
Well, I could, but I want to say one thing. This tradition that we have in the Bible of wiping out other people. I mean, we did the same thing in Israel, the Promised Land. We were told to conquer it and make it our own, and they didn't wipe everybody out, obviously, because there was always idol worshipers that led us astray. But I think there's something in the Jewish thinking, when you think about the Palestinians, that they're sort of like in the way of us occupying all of what we would consider the Promised Land. And I think there are people, they don't say it, no one will say it, but I think there are people that would either like to certainly expel them or do something else. So there's some of that feeling, I think, is in modern day, maybe in the back of people's minds a little bit.
I agree with you 100%. If you read the Torah literally and you accept that God wanted to commit genocide, it wasn't just about anybody. It wasn't like genocide against people living in Russia or Turkey or Africa. It was specifically in the Holy Land. You had to purify the Holy Land. You could not allow idolatry to exist in the Holy Land. The Muslims are, in the Quran, they're told to kill non-believers wherever they might be. That's why you could have Muslims going around executing people in America or anywhere else. The Jews were not told that. The Jews were not given a blanket order to kill people wherever you find them. It was only in the Holy Land. And that is now used, as you say, Rabbi. So I agree with you 100%. If you read that and take it to be God's word, there's no other way to conclude other than God wants the Holy Land purified, and he wants people who don't believe in Judaism to be expelled or to be executed. And that's why the right wing is very, very vicious and very tough against the Palestinians. And when you have people believing that God ordered genocide, it's dangerous. And you have a very combustible mix, because there's many Muslims who believe that God ordered genocide against the Jews. Now you have some Jews thinking God ordered genocide against them. And this literal adherence to the Bible makes peace impossible and violence inevitable. So that's why, one of many reasons why we must challenge that concept.
Yeah, it's a whole other problem what to do with the Palestinians. I don't think anybody has a good solution yet, but it would help if they had different leadership that was more willing to get along.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the Palestinians who live within the confines of Israel are doing pretty well. And people don't usually think about them. When we think Palestinians, we're thinking Gaza, terrorists, Hamas. But if you think about it, there's a whole bunch of Palestinians living within the confines of Israel, and they like it just the way they are. They do not riot, they do not execute, they do not spawn terrorism, because they love living where they are under Israeli rule. They do not want Palestinian rule. They've seen what happened in Hamas-held Gaza and on the West Bank, and they like it. So there is a solution. That is that Israel should be allowed to have independence. There's this crazy type of thinking that, oh my gosh, this is horrible. There's a Palestinian living under Israeli rule. This is terrible. We must free him so that he can have self-determination. Well, as far as I know, there's Jewish people who live in Egypt and Syria and Lebanon and all these other countries, and they don't have a Jewish state in those places. They live under the rule of people of a different religion, and they don't start massacring and attacking. There's Jewish people who live in America who live in a country that's not Jewish, and somehow we seem to get along. So this concept that a Palestinian can't live in a Jewish state is nonsense. Not only that, the Palestinians who are living under Jewish rule like it. So there is a solution. It's called Jewish independence, and it's called having Palestinians live under Israeli rule. I believe because of anti-Semitism, this seems like unacceptable. How horrible. You mean somebody's going to live under Jewish rule? The Jewish people, they're supposed to be a minority. They're supposed to be subject to oppression. How could you have Jewish people ruling over non-Jews? That's a horrible thing. But I think we need to get the world used to the fact that it's okay. They're going to do okay, and the world will go on.
I think some of the Arab thinking, Palestinian Arab thinking, is a lot like the white supremacists in this country. They feel that the white man should be ruling this country, and if the black and brown people became a majority, which may happen sometime this century, they will feel that they're living under the wrong rule and that they should be in charge. And I think that's how the Arabs and Palestinians feel about living under Jewish rule.
Yeah, well, you have a concept in the Quran called Dar al-Islam, which means the Muslim world. And in the Muslim world, it is a grave sin to have anybody else ruling over a Muslim, and they will kill for it. And so Israel is considered by many Muslims to be Arab land or Muslim land, and therefore it's not permissible to have Jews ruling over it. However, there are other passages in the Quran which have been cited by Muslim scholars in which it says that the Jewish people are entitled to the land of Israel, that it was given to the Jews. This is a passage in the Quran, but it's very dangerous for a Muslim to quote that passage because they could be executed. So my friend Sheikh Shafayat Muhammad, who has a Muslim center in Hollywood, he has been known to say it. I've heard him say that according to the Quran, Israel belongs to the Jews, and he's had his life threatened. It's a very dangerous thing, which is really tragic. But that's why the Muslims are so antagonistic towards Israel, because a lot of them think that there's no right to have a Jewish state within the Muslim world.
Go ahead, Emily.
Well, I'm probably again in the minority here, but this is a kind of a repetition of a tribal society that you find everywhere. Is this very different than when the white men took over in this country and drove the tribes out? Peaceful coexistence should be a goal everywhere, but Israel seems not to want any peaceful coexistence. It's once again the conservatives, or what's the word I'm looking for? The very religious of every group that seems to motivate these big wars. I just think that nobody wants to get along because everybody wants to be in control. Gotta give up that control.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Emily, but it's not necessarily the religious. I mean, I consider the people at L'Dor Va-Dor to be religious, but I don't think we're going around saying that we should be ruling over other people. It's not so much the religious, it's the people that take the Torah literally or the Quran literally. If you take it literally, then you believe God gave Israel to the Jewish people and nobody else, and it's our land and we have the right to kill for it. That's pretty much how it is.
Again, here we go. Fundamentalist Christians, fundamentalist right. Jews, fundamentalist, whatever they are. Here we are at a temple group, and I'm saying again, this is the opiate of the people, guys.
Well, you're a free thinker, but the Christians who came here to this country saw themselves as modern day Israelites. Yes. They crossed a great expanse of water like the Jews crossed the desert. They fled persecution like the Jews were fleeing. They came here and they called this their promised land. The name Salem, Massachusetts, is a shortened form of Jerusalem.
That's right.
And they envisioned that they were coming to their promised land. And they looked to the Bible. And in the Bible, it said that when the Jews came to the promised land, they exterminated the native inhabitants of Canaan. And so the white Christians who came here, many of them felt perfectly entitled to exterminate the native inhabitants of this land because they look to the Bible for their inspiration. And that's why as Jews, we must be appalled at this. And we should do everything we can to repudiate this nonsense that God authored the Torah and that God approves of and commands genocide. And that's why we Jews who cherish the Torah, the Bible, Jewish values, we have every right to be proud to be Jewish, but we also have an obligation to challenge those things in our past that have been used by others in order to bring about violence. That's part of the responsibility that we have as Jews.
That's an
Okay,
interesting.
but there's a difference between Jewish values and following the literal word. And I think that's what you're saying, Rabbi, right?
Well, I would put it this way, that the Torah represents the very beginnings of the Jewish effort to be moral and to be the conscience of the world. The Jews saw themselves as having this special role to be moral. So I don't separate values from the Torah. I say the Torah represents our first effort, and therefore there's things in it that we didn't quite get right. Just like if you look at that science, you'll see in the very beginning, they were cutting a hole in someone's head to release evil spirits. That was done in the name of science. Yeah. So we celebrate science, but we don't celebrate it as practiced thousands of years ago. So the Jewish people were doing their best to try to figure out morality. And in their sense, the way they viewed morality, they had a right and an obligation to slaughter people who were making the land of Canaan impure. This was a moral obligation they had. So it's not that we view morality different than the Torah. It's that we view the Torah as our first step towards morality, not our last one. I would phrase it in that way. Rabbi Bissell, how do you see it? What's your view of that?
Well, it's interesting because almost all the people in the Torah do bad things. They're not perfect. I mean, what other civilization has all of its ancestors and heroes do bad things all the time? So that's what's weird. In other words, I think the morality is that we assumed, like Abraham did with Sodom and Gomorrah, that God is a moral being, and God doesn't always act like a moral being either. I mean, he killed everybody in Noah's flood. He wanted, like Barry said, he wanted us to commit genocide against all these other people. There's a lot of bad stuff coming from God and from the people in the Torah. And I'm curious what everybody thinks. Maybe people want to speak out where they think the Torah came from. Was it a collection of Jewish fairy tales, like Bill Maher says? Did it come from God? Was it some kind of inspiration by several writers throughout time? I mean, they're really interesting stories. I mean, why would Abraham be told to sacrifice his son after the miracle of them having a child after menopause? And I mean, it's so crazy, some of the stuff that's in there. So I'm curious what people think about where the Torah came from.
Yeah, I'm curious also, but I just would like to clarify something that when you said, why is God acting in immoral ways? In the United States in 2021, when we read the Torah, it seems, gee, that's immoral. But we're viewing it by our standards of where we are today. If you put yourself back in the days that the Torah was written, they had a view of a hierarchy, of the ultimate power. That was the kings of the Babylonian and Assyrian times. And what they did was, to them, what was moral is those kings had vassal relationships with the lords. And it went something like this: I'm going to give you protection. I'll protect all of you, and you pay tribute to me. You give me some of your land and some of your wealth and some of your soldiers, and pay tribute to me and give me your absolute loyalty, and I will protect you. But if somebody else comes into your realm, I'll wipe them out and I'll protect your area, so you don't have to worry about it. That was considered to be morality, that they would be the protector for all the people. And so therefore, if God's ordering genocide, that's nothing different than what a Babylonian or Assyrian warlord would do. If someone came in and attacked one of his vassals, he would order the genocide against the group that was doing it. So it wasn't that God was acting immorally, it was that he was acting according to the moral standards of that day. And the standards of that day were very barbaric compared to what we consider. There was no democracy back then. They never heard of democracy. They never heard of, treating everybody in a fair way. That was unheard of. So it wasn't immoral. It's just that was the morality of the time. And heaven forbid that we should go back to the morality of those times. But I am interested if anybody wants to take up Rabbi Visol's question about where they think the Torah comes from.
Well, I know that Paul had his hand raised prior to that question, and Raylene has her hand raised. So Paul, you go, and then Raylene. I'm not sure which point you're going to be talking about, Paul.
Good evening. I was thinking back to our earlier conversation about Israel. And whenever I hear these conversations, I'm a bit confused, because what often happens is there's a failure to recognize that 45% of the Jewish population are Mizrahi, are Arab Jews, and suffered incredibly under their Arab masters. And to this day, I remember a friend of mine up in Toronto. She and her family had to walk from Baghdad to escape a pogrom, in 1946, and it's a very real thing. And their relationship with the Palestinians is predicated on that personal experience. And I think those of us from the Ashkenazi European tradition fail to recognize that as being real in the lives of, individuals there and the history of Israel itself. As for the other question, who knows? It's beyond my pay grade.
Paul, I agree with you 100% that Israel was a haven for people who had fled from vicious persecution. It intensified mostly around the time that Israel was created, around 48. Jews and Muslims lived together in relative harmony for quite a while. The Jews were always second-class citizens, but they were treated a lot better than they were under Christian rule for most of the history. But around the time of Israel's formation and after 48, the Jews were treated horribly. They were hung, they were executed, they were tormented, they were persecuted, and they fled for their lives. And I agree with you, we need to remind the world of what was done to those Jewish people and that they found a haven in Israel. And that's why it's so important that Israel be established, and that we need to recognize that the Jewish treatment of the Palestinians need to be viewed in that overall context.
But they weren't just around the 1945, 46, 47. I mean, there was that terrible pogrom that happened in Damascus. I've forgotten the exact, and there were several in Morocco, and even in Baghdad, which was the haven of Middle Eastern Jewry for a long time. These were not just events that happened in that small time frame around the founding of Israel.
No, you're exactly right. There's also an Arab Holocaust. They were in Arab lands. They conspired, many of them,
right,
with Hitler, and committed Holocaust against the Jews. So yeah, you're right. It wasn't confined to 48, and it wasn't confined to 45. The Jews were treated as second-class citizens under Muslim rule. But for the most part, you're right. There were massacres, especially around the 20th century when Israel started to develop. But for the most part, the Jews were treated relatively well for a long time by Muslims. But you're right. There were a lot of atrocities, and you never knew what to expect. If you were Jewish living in a Muslim land, you just never knew what was going to happen.
Right. Right.
Raylene, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, well, way back when you talked about the Puritans came here for religious freedom, and the Indians were good to them. They tried to help them get settled in, but the Puritans made all those Indians slaves for them. So it's just, that's the way of the world, I guess, the survival of the fittest. And it took advantage of the weakness in the Indians, and they kicked them out after they got settled.
You're 100% correct. The Indians were treated with genocide by the people who came in with their Bible in hand. They read the Bible. But I would not agree that this is just the way of the world and that's how it is everywhere. It is not. Not every group of people commits genocide against every other group of people. It's motivated by religious factors.
Yes.
We need to take responsibility for that and accountability, because our Bible, the Jewish Bible, has been used in very malicious ways. That's why my personal goal, and people think, why does he make such a big deal about who wrote the Bible? Who cares? What's the big deal? The big deal is that if you think that God wrote this, you're going to potentially be committing genocide and all types of atrocities. So it is a big deal, and it's our Bible. And so, they say if you broke it, you own it. So we have an obligation to set the record straight, I believe. Who else wants to join in this conversation?
Joel, go ahead.
Most prejudices stem from religion. Whether you're Jewish, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, they have their beliefs that don't tie in with somebody else's belief, and in the name of their religion, they commit the atrocities. A good example, you can go on and on with examples. There's all kinds of examples. ISIS was an example. They went in there and they got rid of all the Kurds, became their enemy because they didn't believe with them. The other factor, I don't remember the name, but they were stuck on the mountain there. Those people. Christians hold up the Bible. They were the ones who brought the slaves here to the States. That was in the 1700s. That's recent. You go on, there's still slavery in this country. There's human trafficking. But they go to their churches, or they go wherever they go. It's in the name of religion. Barry, maybe it comes from the Torah, but it comes from other places too, because it's the Quran, it's the New Testament. The belief that there's a person, that Jesus, I'm getting into something maybe too thick here, but that Jesus is the Savior. You follow in his footsteps. I was told, I'm Jewish, I'm not going to heaven. Well, I don't know where the hell I'm going. I know where I'm going. I'm going to be in a little Voss or something. But anyways, but that's what I was told by a member of my family. Okay, close member. And that was the teachings that they were getting in the Christian religion, I believe it was Baptist. So it's not what was thousands of years ago. It's today. And today you have a man, I call him a man, I'm giving him a benefit of the doubt. You have a senator from Wisconsin who claims to be very pious, very Christian, and spews this hatred on the floor of the Senate. Shame on him. Shame on him. And that's today. That's today. This is 2021. When does it end? When does it end, Barry? It's not going to end with whether the Torah was written by God or written by a bunch of wizards, or it came out of abracadabra. I don't know. That's not going to end it. When is it going to end, Barry? Because you're a believer in this interfaith thing, very strong, and I believe that there are good people out there in other religions. We can tolerate each other. We can understand each other, but they don't make up the numbers of the haters.
Yeah, well, it ends. I agree with much of what you're saying, but your conclusion I would take issue with. It ends when the Torah, the Quran, and Christian scripture are not viewed as the inerrant word of God, but are viewed as the product of humans trying to understand morality and taking their first baby steps towards it. And when we view it in that way, then we're not enslaved by their way of thinking. We don't accept that God orders genocide or God is going to send people to hell. Once we liberate ourselves from the shackles of the mind that are telling us that God wrote this stuff, then we're free to question. Then we can ask things. That's why I say the cure to QAnon is Q&A. When you can ask a question and challenge these books, then it's not going to automatically make the whole world better, but it starts a process of rational thought, which can cause us to liberate ourselves from this oldest of human enslavement, and we can start thinking rationally and not taking it literally. Also, I think that it's not necessarily true that all religion is going to produce these results. And Joel, I agree with you that people do horrible things in the name of religion. They say that people never kill so gleefully as when they do it for God. And so religion has been used for evil, but we need to try to refine our thinking so that we're not just saying all religion's bad, it's all horrible. It's not. Rational religion can be very helpful, and irrational religion is very dangerous. Also, there's religions that are different. So the Western religions coming from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam posits a God who chooses one group over the other ones, and the other ones are expendable. That's dangerous. That by its very nature is divisive. It's going to cause you to look at other people as inferior and under certain circumstances worthy of death. The other religions aren't all like that. For instance, Hinduism and Buddhism have a different type of mindset that doesn't lead towards this type of thinking where we're right and you're all going to hell. It's different. And there's other religions that are different also. Native American religion was very different also. It tended to think that all life, was precious, but on the other hand, Native Americans were slaughtering each other also. So we have to avoid looking at all religion as the same, just like we don't view all government as the same. Some governments have been fascist and they've helped to wipe people out, and some governments believe in freedom like ours. So we can't lump them all together. Go ahead, Harris.
Yeah, well, in some cases, it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with the success of the Jews. Okay, just recently, the lieutenant governor of North Carolina came out with a lot of anti-Semitic items, and he wouldn't apologize. And it had to do with the success of the Jews. He put down the Rothschilds or whatever, and he was a African American. Okay, it was in the Jerusalem Post today. But I have some good news. The Muslims and the Jews are getting together in Bahrain, where they're going to revitalize the Jewish communities in the Gulf states. So that's the good news. And if that works, that would be wonderful.
There is very, very good news coming out of the Middle East all over the Muslim world. There are very good signs of the beginnings of cooperation. Harris, what you mentioned about a Christian pastor, a Christian leader saying terrible things about the Jews, especially the successful ones, has a long, long history in Christianity. According to traditional Christianity, the Jews are cursed and the Christians are saved. Therefore, they looked around. If they saw successful Jews, that was a problem to them. How could a Jewish person who rejected Jesus and is cursed by God do well? How could that happen? There's only one way to explain it. The only way is that that person's in cahoots with the devil. That person is no longer working for God, they're working for the devil, and the devil has caused them to prosper to lead people astray. In fact, Martin Luther, who founded the Protestant movement, said, look around at the Jewish people. They think they're doing well. They're living in communities, they're doing well. This is disgraceful. For a Christian world to allow the Jews to prosper is a disgrace to Jesus. They killed Jesus, and now they're doing well. Therefore, we must punish them. We must suppress them. We must burn their synagogues. We must put them into ghettos. We must make them wear a star. We must do these horrible things to the Jewish people to show them what their true place is, and that we're not going to allow this to happen. Now, many people resent me saying this, but it's true. This is where Protestant religion comes from. Fortunately, most Protestants today don't believe that. But if we're not aware of the history, then we're doomed to repeat it. And we better understand that this statement that he made is not something said in isolation. There's a very, very long, ugly history behind it.
Raylene, go ahead.
I was just wondering about the rioters, because I don't think these rioters that were on January 6th were rioting for religion. They were rioting because they think the white man is going to be the strong people, and they don't want brown, black, Jewish, any other people. They take away their dignity, their manliness. So I don't think it's the religion with these latest people, these white supremacists.
Yeah, let me just put it into context, and also about what Joel was saying. You know, what he said, when religion causes everything. Religion itself sometimes is the sole factor for causing murder and genocide, and sometimes it just is like it's used like gasoline to exacerbate things. There's other factors going on, greed or power or politics, and religion is used to motivate people. But in this particular case, Raylene, you're right. Many people were motivated by reasons that had nothing to do with religion. But when they took over the Capitol, they proclaimed the Capitol in the name of Jesus Christ. Many of these people who came in were Christian white supremacists who were very, very religiously motivated. And the QAnon philosophy comes straight out of Christian conspiracy theory, linking the Jews and the devil and child molestation and a savior and apocalyptic times. This stuff comes straight out of Christian apocalyptic type of thinking. So there's a lot of religious behind it, but you're right, some of the people were not motivated by religion at all. Go ahead, Sharon.
So 60 Minutes had a great piece on QAnon last Sunday. If you didn't see it, you can watch it on demand. But they said that the pandemic fueled the QAnon, it fueled them to move on. They're sitting in their house, they're depressed, they don't have anything else to do. They go on the computer, they start seeing, oh, look at this and look at this, and they get sucked in, and a lot of these people got sucked in. One of the people that was actually at the Capitol was the son of an Orthodox judge from New York. On that piece from 60 Minutes on Sunday, this one guy said he's basically lost his mother because she's just wrapped up into the QAnon. She's, I don't know, in mid 70s, late 70s, and she's totally immersed into the QAnon theory. And he said she's basically gone from him. He doesn't know how to bring her back. And he's a psychologist. He's done everything he could. So, the pandemic, they thought that if the pandemic goes away tomorrow, then much of the QAnon will go away as well. But since the pandemic is not going away tomorrow, and it's probably going to be here for another year to year and a half, then QAnon's going to just keep growing and growing and getting stronger and stronger and stronger, unfortunately.
It's not just that they don't have anything to do. It's that conspiracy theory is based on the fact that we're in apocalyptic times, that the forces of good and evil are fighting against each other in a worldwide like cataclysm, and something huge is going to happen, and God is going to win out over the forces of evil. That's what QAnon, and so the pandemic led people to believe like God's really pissed off. I mean, people are dying left and right. And in biblical days, when people were dying left and right from a plague or something, that's because God was really angry. QAnon is very similar, like I say, to Christian apocalyptic thinking. You have a conspiracy, the forces of evil, the Jewish people, and in Christian theology, in the book of Revelations, God's going to come back at the end, and he's going to have his righteous soldier fighting for him, his Messiah, and he's going to go and lead the charge against all these bad, horrible people. And then you have President Trump saying, he's tweeting, I'm king of the Jews, I'm the second coming of God. And to the QAnon people and to the Proud Boys, they looked at this and they said, wow, this guy is it. This is the Messiah. He's proclaiming himself the Messiah. He's our leader. And they blindly followed him, and he played the role very well, like he was fighting for God. And so these people who believe this conspiracy theory, they're just ripe for the picking. And you're right, the pandemic caused people to think we're heading towards the end times. And really, that's what, if you think about it, that's really what Purim's about also. It's saying that there's no one person who's going to lead the charge against, all evil, and we should all rally behind this person and just bow down to this person. That type of thinking is very, very dangerous.
Go ahead, Emily.
Well, I think it's so easy for us. We could solve all the problems of the world here. I think there has to be a differentiation between government and religion. The purpose of government is to make things run smoothly, pick up your trash and, run the country, be the CEO of the country. The purpose of religion is to give a code of conduct to people. And I think one of the problems we have here is that there's no separation between government and religion. This is not a Judeo-Christian government. It should be a government that talks about running the country, and let religion be separate. I know you're laughing at me, right?
Separation of state and religion.
Yeah.
Gee, isn't that in the papers and documents?
I think that's why our country is successful, because we do that. I don't think they have to be distinct. I think that it would make sense for the religion and government to work together. But what is essential is that the religion not be in power or have anything to do with ruling the country or intertwined with the governing of the country. But the two of them should work hand in hand together. That would be nice. Go ahead, Valerie.
Well, from what I'm hearing now, people seem to, there are many advanced thinkers, but what I'm hearing now is you're telling, and many people are feeling this, that religion is a relic. It's a useless relic. You don't need religion. You need, wait a second, you need spirituality and morality. You don't need religion. Religion, hundreds or thousands of years ago, was there to bring people together because we didn't have, quite frankly, the population. So people needed to be a cohesive unit, a cohesive village, a cohesive entity in order to function. Okay, now what religion has become is a wall between people. Okay, there is a very big difference between religion and spirituality. There's a very big difference between those two things. And as far as I'm concerned, the more I listen to not only here, but other places, religion is a relic. Religion has outlived its usefulness. It's no longer bringing people together. It is now pulling people apart. And therefore, who needs it? That's what I'm hearing a lot of people saying. And you know something? I have a child. He's now 30. He's got a very strong moral compass. He doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to kill. He wants to make things better. And he won't set foot in a temple. He wouldn't set foot in a temple. And he was bar mitzvah. He wouldn't set foot in a temple if his life depended on it.
Why not?
Okay, because I don't need religion. I need spirituality. I need morality. I need to respect my fellow man. But religion has outlived its usefulness. And many, many young people are starting to feel that.
Right. And the
Especially
reason
now with the internet, and they're able to see how other civilizations and other people in other parts of the world live that aren't radical. Okay, and more younger people are beginning to feel that religion has outlived its usefulness.
Yeah, I would contend that the reason why people are thinking that is based on ignorance.
No, it's not based on ignorance. It's based on observation.
No, let me
You
finish.
have to understand what.
Finish.
Yes.
How many Shabbat celebrations has your son witnessed from L'Dor Va-Dor?
Don't give me L'Dor Va-Dor.
No, I'm asking you.
Is a microscopic piece
I'm asking you a question. How many Shabbat celebrations from L'Dor Va-Dor has your son witnessed?
None.
Okay, so you're telling me that based on observation, he's concluded that Judaism's a relic. And what I'm telling you is that—
No, you see you're pulling L'Dor Va-Dor in here. I'm not saying that. I'm not picking out of L'Dor Va-Dor. I'm not picking out, you might, because that's your perspective.
No, let me finish.
Perspective. Well, you're not letting me finish.
Go ahead, finish.
Religion, Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Protestants, Christians, Muslims, you name it, Hutu tribe, the Taliban, the Protestants, it doesn't matter. Organized religion, as it was put together, was supposed to unify and make people a cohesive entity. That is no longer happening. Religion and your perspective on religion pulls people, not yours per se, but religion in general is pulling people apart. It's creating walls between people, okay? There's a difference between religion and spirituality. There's a difference between there's a difference between morality and spirituality. They are not mutually exclusive.
Are you finished?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what I was saying is, you said that your son's opinion is based on observation, and I'm saying it is not based on observation of all of Judaism. It's based on ignorance. And the reason I say that—
I was brought up in his grandfather and I was brought up in an Orthodox temple, okay? My opinion is not based on ignorance. My opinion is based on insight. I went from Orthodox to Reform to conservative to the hell with this. That's how I've been.
I feel like a prisoner who's not able to finish his sentence. So let me
my world.
let me try to continue. I didn't say your view. I said your son's view is based on ignorance.
It's not. I'm sorry. My son is not ignorant. He's highly educated and very intelligent, and he went to Hebrew school, and he knows about the Jewish religion, and he observed the Orthodox Jewish religion from his father, his conservative from his grandfather, his Reform from me. He is not ignorant. He made his decision out of insight, and I'm not picking on my son per se. I'm just using him as an example, and I'm using him as an overall example because I've spoken to many, many, many young people and older people as well that will not set foot into an Orthodox temple, will not set foot into a church, will not set foot into a mausoleum. They won't set foot into anything because religion, in their opinion, has outlived its usefulness. It's a relic.
Let me try to
rather
finish my
talk to
sentence.
other people instead of talk to religious leaders.
Let me try to finish my sentence again.
Okay.
Your son's view is based on ignorance. Because
no, and I object to that, and I resent that, really, that you're calling my son ignorant, because he's not ignorant. He's highly intelligent. He has a different opinion of yours. And because someone doesn't agree with your opinion doesn't mean they're ignorant. That means they have a different opinion based on their life experience. People have lives.
Let me try to—
I will jump all over you on that one.
You have 8 times already. You've used the jump over me 8 times, and you haven't let me finish my sentence once. So let me try again.
I've listened to you for a year and a half.
he may be the most brilliant person in the world on 100 different subjects. But when it comes to all the different varieties of Judaism, he doesn't know everything because he's never seen a Shabbat celebration at L'Dor Va-Dor. Therefore, he is ignorant of what happens in L'Dor Va-Dor, apparently, because he's never seen it. Now, if he says that religion is a relic, that's ignorant because many forms of Judaism are relics. Orthodox Judaism, fundamentalist Christianity, they're relics. But to say that religion is a relic and it's no longer doing anything useful or helpful is in my opinion, ignorant because it shows a lack of knowledge about, for instance, Reform Judaism, which spends a lot of time working on causes and issues and helping humanity and brings people together. What
That's
we do at
morality.
L'Dor Va-Dor
That's
brings
spirituality.
people
That's not
together.
religion.
It's not a relic what we do. The
What you're doing, what you're describing is not religion. What you're describing is socialism, having a social conscience. That's what you're describing.
You're saying what I'm doing, what we do at L'Dor Va-Dor, you're saying is not religion?
You have a social conscience. You have a very strong social conscience. And that's very commendable. And that's,
But to you, that means that we're not religious?
I'm not religious. I don't consider myself religious. I consider myself spiritual. I don't consider myself religious.
Yeah. Well, let me just help clarify terms here.
Okay.
To some people, what religious means is doing a bunch of stupid, ridiculous, ignorant things just because it's a ritual, just going through a meaningless ritual that doesn't mean anything to anybody. That's what religious means. To many people, that's not what religion is in every instance. There are some people who practice religion in that way, but that's not per se religion. That's like saying the Nazis were murdering people. Therefore, to me, government means killing everybody. There's different types of government and there's different types of religion. And most people who are Jewish, who are born Jewish, who don't want to have anything to do with Judaism, who thinks it's a relic, don't understand what being religious is all about. They've never learned it. They've gone to synagogues that have not taught them properly. They've gone to synagogues that don't respect their intelligence. And they've gone to synagogues that do things that are pretty much like a relic. Most of the synagogues that I've been to, if I came out of them, I would think this is a waste of time or it's a relic because I wouldn't be familiar with all the different forms. So here's what religion means. Religion means that it comes from a Latin root. Lig means to bind together. And it's related to the word ligament, you bind together. What religion means is trying to bind ourselves together with all other things in the cosmos. It's binding ourselves together with the entire universe and everything in it and all other living things. That's religious. Okay, so if I want to help the planet, if I want to work for animal rights, if I want to bring people together, that's religious. Now, to some people, no, that's not religion. That's spiritual because religion is bad and spiritual is good. Religion is archaic and spiritual is enlightened. But that's not what religion has to be. Religious could be, and in our case at L'Dor Va-Dor, is bringing people together, working on social causes, using our rational mind, and having an evolutionary way of looking at Judaism. That is religious. That's what my father always taught me, that doing a lot of rituals and eating the right food, that's not what makes you religious. What makes you religious is trying to be a good person and using Jewish ideals and values to make the world better. He put it this way. Religion or being Jewish isn't what you're wearing on your head, it's the thoughts in your head. It's not the food in your mouth, it's the words that are coming out of your mouth. It's not avoiding shellfish, it's avoiding the selfish. Now, you could say that, well, you can do all these things without religion. Who needs it? I could be a good person. Like your son would say, I can be a good person without Judaism. I don't need it. It's just irrelevant to me because I don't need a religion to teach me how to be a good person. And what I would say is, you're right. You don't need religion to be a good person. You could be a good person without it. However, if you're a good person and you're Jewish, you're now part of a team. Like I can play good basketball and just go to my court and play on my own. But if I want to play as a team, I need to find other people that are doing the same thing and work with them in common cause because I'm more effective that way and we can accomplish more. If I want to help the homeless, I could go out and try to build a house, or I could work for Habitat for Humanity with a lot of other people and do it more constructively. What Judaism is, it's a multi-thousand year, multi-generational effort to make the world better. And it has values and ideals that strengthen us and a history and morality that can strengthen us if we view it rationally, and we can all draw support from each other. We can sing songs together, we can fellowship together, we can get principles from our holidays and our sacred texts in order to make our lives better, to strengthen our ability to be good people and understand what being a good person is really all about. Yeah, I could do it on my own,
Yes,
but
you
I can do
can.
a lot better with a bunch of other people.
But you just spent, many, many hours, not only here, but in the past, talking about all of the horrors and the wars and the conflicts that were caused by what? Religion, okay? Which is my whole point. Religion at one point was there to pull people together. Religion now in modern days is pulling people apart. And what you just are quoting and talking about is spirituality, is morality, is humanism, okay? And very important, pulling together as people, as human beings. And you said something about governments. I have nothing against the Arabic government. I have nothing against Iranian people. It's the government that I have something about. So I do have a problem in certain forms with government, because I don't hate the Muslims. I don't hate the blacks. I don't hate the Indians. I like them. They're nice people, but it's their leaders that are crazy. And what's creating that? It's their concepts. It's their concepts of being separate, of being different, okay?
Yeah,
Of being mine is better than yours and I'm better than you. And that's basically what a lot of religion is. My religion's better than yours, okay? My God's better than yours, okay? My beliefs are better than yours.
Do you know what the world was like under the Roman Empire? Under the Roman Empire, if the Romans didn't, if you were a Roman citizen, they could crucify you. They could slaughter you. They had no obligation to help the poor. They had no morality whatsoever. They would throw you into into the Colosseum and cheer for you. So you could tell me that religion is a waste of time.
That it had no morality.
What I'm going to tell you
You're
is that
equating morality with religion. You're equating morality with religion. I'm not. There's a difference.
Morality is religion, and religion is morality. You can't possibly understand Judaism without understanding morality. In Judaism,
of course you can. Of course you can. I teach my son not to go out and hit somebody. I tell my son not to go out and rob somebody. I tell my son not to run somebody over with a car. I care about other people. Other people have feelings. Other people have lives. Okay, that's morality. I believe
you misunderstand what I said. You can have morality without religion. Yes.
Yes.
But you cannot have Judaism without morality. To suggest that morality.
Judaism. Well, there are a lot of people in this world that aren't Jewish.
To suggest this is an important point that I need to make.
Okay.
The whole point of Judaism is morality. I'm not sure where you're getting this from, that you can have
from your
Judaism
perspective. But even Rabbi Khan has a different concept of what religion is. Okay?
No, let me explain something.
You are still all moral people.
Let me explain something, okay? The primary purpose of Judaism is morality. To suggest that you can have Judaism without morality, that there's a difference. Judaism is here for morality. Now, Rabbi Khan's understanding of what Jewish morality is different in some ways than mine. And my understanding is different than Rabbi Visol's, and your understanding is different than mine. But it's impossible to even talk about Judaism without talking about morality. The whole point of Judaism is morality. It's just a matter of how do we interpret it. What I'm suggesting is that the way to become moral under a Jewish perspective has to start with getting rid of the notion that God wrote the Torah, because the Torah has all types of things that are not moral. So you have to liberate yourself from that, and then you can have morality. When I say that Judaism is morality, there's certain ideals that run through everything. Rabbi Khan and I will both say it's morality. Jewish morality is to help the poor. We'll both say that. Any Jew will say that. Jewish morality is to help the underdog. Jewish morality is to prevent the government from oppressing people. Jewish morality is to feed people. Jewish morality is to be kind and to be loving. All Jews are going to say that across the board. And that was brought by the Jewish people to the world. There was a time where the world thought that how you treat other people doesn't really matter so much. There was a time that you could do things to other people that were vicious. Judaism brought morality in many ways to the world in a perfect form, and through Christianity and Islam. But there's a morality in many countries. If the poor are starving, that was their fate. That's their lot. That's karma. Judaism doesn't see it that way. Judaism says, if there's a hungry person anywhere, a person suffering anywhere, if there's an animal suffering somewhere, you have to help. That's Judaism, and that is a tremendous blessing that we brought to the world. And if there was no such thing as Judaism, I don't think those values would be there like they are today. And many people don't realize it because a fish doesn't know it's wet, because it's just submerged in water. So we don't realize that there's Jewish values around because it's just all around. But many of the values that we hold dear came from the Jewish Bible. Now, I agree with you. There's certain things that are harmful that come from a literal reading that we need to expunge. But any person who says Judaism's irrelevant, doesn't have anything to do with morality, it's a relic, ignores a vast amount of history and the Jewish people fighting for morality in every age. Even today, you will see Jews fighting for morality across the board and making the world a better place. And somebody who decides not to be Jewish, and someone who says, I don't need Judaism, I could be good on my own, is ignoring the fact that the Jewish people over thousands of years have contributed more than any other group of people to make this world better. And what they're saying is, I don't want to be a part of this group that's done so much to help the world. My group, I don't want to be a part of it. I'll go it on my own. And to me, that shows an ignorance of what Judaism's all about and what we've been able to accomplish.
Well, there are a lot of religions that are very, very old, along with Judaism, but what you're describing is kindness. What you're describing is a sense of morality, a sense of decency. And there are aspects of every religion, quote unquote, that have that. But you don't need religion to have that. You can teach that. You can teach that. That's being educated. That's being intelligent.
Who's gonna teach you that human beings are basically good? Who's gonna teach you that we have who?
I didn't have to go to Hebrew school to know that if somebody shoots somebody, they're not good. I don't have to go to Hebrew school to know that. I know that.
It helps. It definitely helps.
But I don't need to go to Hebrew school for somebody to tell me if I shoot somebody, that's bad.
No,
I know that's bad.
That's not what I'm talking about. But before Suzanne, I just want to
I'm
share something.
boiling it down to the most simplistic terms. You're saying that unless somebody's Jewish, they're not good people. And I'm saying I don't agree with you on that.
Did I ever say that if you're not Jewish, you're not a good person? Please.
I don't know. It sort of sounds like
it. Please. Do not impute something to me that is the exact opposite of anything I've ever said. I've never, ever remotely said that if you're not Jewish, you're not a good person. Nor would I ever say such a vile thing. So don't impute that to me. But let me just share something with you. If you talk to most people in the world and you say, are people basically good or are they basically evil? If they're Christian, they'll say they're born evil. If they're of no religion, they'll say, well, they're kind of good, they're kind of bad. It's kind of a mixed thing. If they're Jewish, they will say, we believe human beings are good. And not only that, we believe we have the capacity to be even better. And not only that, we believe that the world ultimately is going to be perfected by kindness and love. That is something that is critically important. Why? Because if I teach my kid, you're a bad kid, you're a no good kid, you're a stupid kid, he's going to be stupid and he's going to be bad.
That's called Nietzsche.
If I teach
Nietzsche
my kid,
had that concept. He was you know who Nietzsche is? And Kierkegaard. Now you're talking about psychology. Now you're talking about psychology, Nietzsche and Kierkegaard.
If I teach my kid that you're a good kid, you're a smart kid, you're an athletic kid, he's going to be that way more likely. How you teach a kid to think is going to affect greatly how he's going to develop. The same thing is true with religion. If I have a religion that's going to teach humanity that human beings are basically good, the human soul is basically positive, and that if we use our minds and our hearts, we can make a better world. If Jews teach that to the world, The world has a fighting chance of being good, of being moral. But if we teach that human beings are a mixed bag or that we're evil, which many religions do, then that's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The reason why Judaism is so important is because we have a basic faith in the goodness and the kindness of people. And if you tell me that you don't need Judaism to do that, I would strenuously disagree, because not everybody accepts that proposition, and many people accept the opposite. Judaism believes that we're born pure and good, and we can become that way. And that becomes potentially a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's one of the reasons why Judaism is so important. I'm sorry, Suzanne.
That's all right. What I wanted to say is I understand where Valerie's coming from. Now, I grew up in a conservative background, and I really loved the teachings of Judaism. I was at temple as much as I could be. I loved it all. I loved the togetherness. I loved the song and the prayers. And even like when we used to meet together, I love all that. And I loved all the social interaction. So I understand that. What I think we really need to start focusing on is that people aren't going to remember what you did or said, but how you made them feel. So we can agree to have differences, but we have to just be respectful of each other. And that's what's important to me. You know, that's how I see it all. You know, I like everything. I like the congregation. I like when we were having the activities and all the togetherness. And the virtual to me isn't as much engaging as it was as being face to face. So that's all I have to say. And, you know, I just want to say that if we say that we're all rational and everybody else isn't rational, then how is that person going to feel? Because they're being made to feel like they're not rational because they believe something different. So I think we just have to respect each other's opinions and just kind of like try to all get along and try to bring unity in that way. Because I think if the congregation is going to survive, we're going to need to realize that people are going to have different opinions, but how can we make them feel like, you know, if it's important to you, then that's great. I respect your opinion. It doesn't mean that I have to believe in your opinion, but I can just be respectful of it. That's just something to think about.
Yeah, I think it's great that we have respect for people, but I don't respect all opinions. And if we do respect all opinions, that's the beginning of immorality. If somebody says to me, my opinion is that Blacks are inferior, and I say, I respect that. And if somebody says, my opinion is that poor people should stay poor and we shouldn't help them, I don't respect that. If somebody says my opinion is that every person in the country should have a gun, I don't respect that opinion. And if somebody has the opinion that anti-Semitism is okay or the Holocaust didn't happen, I don't respect that. And I do believe that we should have respectful dialogue. But the day that we say I respect every opinion and I don't draw any distinctions is the day that we go down a very immoral path. And that's part of the problem in this country. We're losing the ability to distinguish between fact and fiction, right and wrong, and opinions that are worthy of respect and opinions that should be repudiated and rejected. So friendly discourse is really good.
Absolutely.
But to respect every opinion is dangerous.
Well, the news isn't always accurate, first off. And so sometimes we don't know what is the truth and what isn't the truth. Just because the news is telling us that and we see it on TV doesn't mean that it's the truth. It's whatever they want us to believe in. So, I mean, I'm not telling you to respect somebody who's going to be immoral. I'm just saying that, you know, if it's not hurting somebody and, you know, that we don't need to fight with people like this. We need to work on unity. We talk about having unity, but then we go and we hear negativities. So why can't we just focus on trying to be more positive and think of things in a positive light as much as possible, instead of always like having to have these negatives thrown at us? To me, that's not what coming to a religious service is about. If I want to have something that feels exciting and makes me feel happy, I want to hear more towards the positive. Just opinion to try to get you thinking about how we're going to go in a positive direction.
Yeah, well, I happen to believe that L'Dor Va-Dor is an exceptionally positive direction. We saw it last Saturday. But Judaism, I guess sadly for some, judges. And Judaism says that you should not fail to criticize immorality. And Judaism says that if you don't challenge people who are doing something wrong, then you share in their guilt. The other thing I'll say also is that there is a mindset in the United States that's very prevalent, Hey, how do you know what's real? You don't know what's right or wrong. You don't know what's true. Who am I to judge? Everybody's cool. Every opinion's great. I have no way of knowing what's right or wrong. The ones who really started that, I think, was the tobacco industry. When people said, you know what, smoking's causing cancer and it's addictive. They knew that, but they had scientists that they paid to come in and say, hey, we don't really know that. There's different opinions on it. We don't really know. So go ahead and smoke, and there's no way of knowing. And from there, we have people coming in saying all types of horrible things. And their defense is not I'm right and you're wrong. The defense is we don't know. We don't know if QAnon is right or not. We don't know if climate change is true or not. We don't know all these things. That is a very dangerous way of thinking. When you throw up your hands and say, who knows? We can't tell right from wrong, fact from fiction, truth from falsehood. That's when horrible things happen. That's when that's how dictatorships come along. We don't know what's right, so go with me. We have to be able to draw distinctions. That's why a rational approach to religion is so important, because we have to be able to use our rational mind to distinguish right from wrong. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, to me, I mean, there's all kinds of sources of morality. I mean, if you tell an atheist he can't be moral, they're going to be really upset. And
Yep.
doctors have the creed "do no harm." I mean, that's pretty good too. But for me, what Judaism brought to the world, and what I think is still the basic core of all morality, is where it says in the creation story that God created man in the image of God. And to me, that means everybody has a piece of God in them. You can call it a soul. Barry would call it something creative, whatever you want to call it. We have a piece of God in us. And because of that, everybody is holy in a certain way. They may not act holy. They may not think holy. They have the ability to be holy. And so that's why you can care for other people and not discriminate and not whatever you want to think about them. You can be all prejudiced as much as you want, but you can't take their humanity away from them because they have a piece of God in them. And you could say the same about some of the animals too.
A very, very, very good point. Probably a good point that we could conclude on, unless other people have some thoughts they'd like to share. I appreciate your comment, Rabbi Visol, because that is a critical element of Judaism, to recognize the holiness and the sanctity, not only of human beings, not only of people who don't look like us or talk like us, but the sanctity of all living things. And that it's all part of a miraculous, wondrous creation. Not that it's just there and taken for granted. But that's another thing about Judaism, that it encourages us to celebrate life and to cherish every day, and to realize that everything around us is a wonder. And that's a real blessing. So thank you. I think that's a good way to end it, Rabbi.
Thank you so
Visol.
much for this. Thank you, thank you, thank you.